So in this video, we're going to talk about how to evaluate the integral of trig functions and trig values using both the unit circle and a calculator, because I know that's something that people had questioned about. So in this specific situation, we're evaluating the integral from pi over 6 to pi over 3 of cosine x plus cosecant x cotangent x dx. So the first thing we have to do is take the antiderivative of each term. So the antiderivative of cosine x becomes sine of x, and the antiderivative of cosecant x cotangent x becomes negative cosecant x, and we're evaluating that from pi over 6 to pi over 3. So we do our f of b minus our f of a, so this is our f of b minus our f of a, where we plug each of those trig values in. So pi over 3 is our b, so it's sine pi over 3, cosecant pi over 3, and then pi over 6 is our a, so sine pi over 6, cosecant pi over 6. Now the next step is where some people are getting tripped up with, how do I evaluate this? What do I do? So sine pi over 3, you could reference a unit circle, and we know that sine pi over 3, that is the same as 60 degrees, and sine of 60 degrees is square root 3 over 2 from the unit circle. So many people have been asking, it's like, well, how do you know that? Go reference the unit circle, the information from trig class. May or may not be your strong suit or your forte, but it's something that you can use. And then people were like, well, how do you figure out the cosecant pi over 3? It's not on the unit circle. But we do know that cosecant of x is equal to 1 over sine of x, which means it's the reciprocal of that function. So if sine of pi over 3 was root 3 over 2, then we know cosecant of pi over 3 is going to be the reciprocal of that, or the flipped version, so it would be 2 over root 3. It's a very simple way to do it, and then you can plug both of those into your calculator. So square root 3 over 2 is approximately 0.866. 2 over root 3 is approximately 1.155. And then you simplify that down, and we'll get to this side in a second. And then sine pi over 6, once again, if you go to the unit circle, sine pi over 6 is a sine of 30 degrees. So sine of 30 degrees is 1/2 from the unit circle. And once again, the same exact principle, cosecant is reciprocal with sine. So if it's 1 over 2, then the cosecant of pi over 6 is 2 over 1. Simplify that down, so it's 0.5 minus 2, which is negative 1.5, with a final answer of 1.21. Now some people were wondering too, is like, could I just plug this into my calculator? You know, I don't remember the unit circle. It's a lot of work to go back and memorize it. I get that. So let's look at another idea. So we do know sine pi over 3. I could plug that directly into my calculator. If I did sine pi over 3, I would get the direct result of 0.866. Just make sure when you do that, when you do sine pi over 3, your calculator needs to be in radians. If it's in degrees, it's going to give you a funky, weird number that may seem like it makes sense, but it really won't. Now, for cosecant pi over 3, people are always like, well, how do I put that in my calculator? There's one very simple way to do that. So we know sine pi over 3 is 0.866. Well, I know that cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So I could say cosecant of pi over 3 is the same as 1 over sine pi over 3. Now I know sine pi over 3 is 0.866. So cosecant pi over 3 is the same as 1 over 0.866. When you plug that into your calculator, you would get 1.155. The easiest, most surefire way, and clearly you could do the same for the second portion, where if you did 1 divided by 0.5, you would get 2. It's an easy way to plug either cosecant, secant, or cotangent into your calculator.